Marry me. Think of it as a contract. One night, and your life changes. A millionaire took a homeless woman to his ex's wedding until she spoke, and the room fell silent. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss our cinematic love stories. Are you watching on YouTube or Spotify today? Tell us in the comments. Let's begin. Now, let us return to our main character. Rain poured across the windshield of a black Mercedes gliding down Fifth Avenue. The city lights blurred into silver streaks as Lucas Grant, 32, stared out the window in silence. His reflection looked colder than the glass itself, clean suit, perfect tie, heart locked behind a wall of old wounds. At a red light, he saw her. A woman standing by the bus stop, soaked through her thin coat, clutching a worn duffel bag. She looked invisible to everyone, rushing by everyone except him. Lucas lowered the window just enough for his voice to cut through the storm. "Get in," he said. The woman hesitated. "Excuse me?" I said. "Get in. You will freeze out there." She stared at him, uncertain whether this was kindness or danger. But the rain grew heavier, and something in his tone, controlled but not cruel, made her step forward. She opened the door and slid inside, dripping water onto the leather seats. He glanced at her briefly, then back at the road. "What is your name?" "Mara," she whispered, still shivering. He nodded once. "Mara, you look like someone who could use a fresh start." She gave a nervous laugh. "If that is your polite way of saying I am homeless, you are right." Lucas exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening on the steering wheel. "I have an offer for you. It is not what you think." She turned to him, confused. "What kind of offer?" He looked at her now. Really looked. Beneath the soaked hair and exhaustion, there was quiet strength in her eyes. "I need someone to accompany me to a wedding. Tonight," he said. "My ex-fiancée's wedding." Mara blinked. "You want me to crash your ex's wedding?" "Not crash. Attend," he corrected. "As my date, for one night only. You will have a dress, a hotel room, and $5,000 in cash when it is over." She almost laughed. "That sounds insane. Why would you ask me?" "Because everyone else in my life already has an agenda," he said flatly. "And you have nothing to lose." Silence filled the car except for the sound of rain tapping against the roof. Mara looked out the window, at the city she used to belong to, and at her reflection, a stranger with nowhere to go. "What would you need me to do?" she asked softly. "Smile," Lucas said. "Stand beside me. Pretend you belong in my world." "And if I do not?" He gave a faint, almost broken smile. "Then pretend better than anyone else ever has." The car slowed in front of a boutique, still glowing with warm light. Through the window, mannequins in evening gowns stood like silent witnesses. Lucas handed her a sleek black card and a folded envelope. "Tell them you are with me. Everything is covered. Be ready in an hour." Mara looked down at the card, then back at him. "You are serious. I do not joke about contracts," he said quietly. She hesitated, water dripping from her hair onto her hands. "What if I say no?" He met her eyes, calm and certain. "Then you walk back into the rain, and tomorrow, nothing changes." The silence stretched, heavy as the thunder outside. Then she reached for the door handle, paused, and looked back at him. "Fine," she said, "but if this goes wrong, you will owe me more than money." Lucas nodded once, almost as if he expected that answer. "Fair enough." As she stepped out into the downpour and disappeared into the glow of the shop, he leaned back against the seat, running a hand through his hair. The corner of his mouth lifted just barely. Maybe tonight, the lie he bought would be the first truth he ever felt. The boutique smelled of warm fabric and perfume when Mara stepped inside. Rows of dresses shimmered under soft golden light. The clerk looked up, her polite smile fading as she took in Mara's wet hair and torn shoes. "I am here for Mr. Grant," Mara said, handing her the card. Instantly, the woman's posture changed. "Of course, right this way." Within an hour, the mirror reflected someone unrecognizable. The dirt was gone, the borrowed gown wrapped around her like a promise she did not remember making. The color deep navy matched the eyes of the man waiting outside. When she returned to the car, Lucas barely looked up from his phone, yet his voice softened. "You clean up well." She raised an eyebrow. "That was not a compliment, was it?" "It was an observation," he replied. They drove through the city as the skyline rose like glass mountains. The silence between them felt heavy, filled with unspoken deals and private fears. Finally, she asked, "Why her wedding?" He exhaled, long and quiet. "Because everyone there believes I cannot move on. They are right. Until tonight." Mara studied him. "You think showing up with me fixes that?" "No," he said, eyes fixed on the road. "But it reminds them that I am still in control." She turned to the window, watching raindrops race each other down the glass. "And what do I get out of this control?" He paused. "A beginning." The car slowed near a grand hotel, its front lit by chandeliers spilling through tall windows. Guests in suits and gowns stepped from limousines. Flashbulbs from photographers burst like fireworks. Lucas parked a block away and handed her a folded envelope. "Your story. Read it." Inside were printed details, her name, background, how they met at a charity gala. Every line felt like a costume she had to wear. "You wrote all this?" she asked. He nodded. "People will ask. Know your part." Her voice turned low. "And what is your part, Lucas?" He looked at her at last. "Pretend I am not still in love with the bride." For a moment, no one spoke. Then she gave a small, brave smile. "That might be the only thing I do not have to pretend about." They stepped out. The night air smelled of rain and roses. Inside, violins played beneath the murmur of wealthy voices. The moment they entered, heads turned. Cameras flashed. Whispered judgments filled the room. Mara felt their eyes slide over her like knives, cutting through silk and confidence. Lucas placed his hand lightly on her back, not possessive, not tender, simply a reminder that she was not alone in this performance. At the center of the ballroom stood Elena, radiant in white, her laughter sharp as crystal. When she saw Lucas, her smile froze for half a second before reforming into charm. "Lucas," she said, stepping forward, her new husband behind her. "You made it." Her eyes flicked to Mara. "And you brought company." Mara extended her hand, steady. "Mara Brooks, thank you for having us." Elena's handshake was light, her words sweeter than they sounded. "You look lovely." "Where did you two meet?" Lucas answered before Mara could. "At a shelter fundraiser." She was volunteering. The crowd around them exchanged glances, some impressed, some amused. Someone whispered, "How noble." Another chuckled. Mara caught every tone, every smirk. She had lived invisible for so long. Now the attention felt like heat pressing against her skin. Yet she stood tall, meeting their eyes one by one. Lucas watched her, silent, realizing the woman beside him no longer seemed out of place. She did not need to act rich. She only needed to act like herself. Then the orchestra paused, and Elena raised her glass for a toast. The moment hung between them like a blade about to fall. And when Mara finally spoke, the night began to change. The orchestra quieted. Crystal glasses gleamed beneath chandeliers. Laughter faded into whispers as all eyes turned toward the man who once belonged to the bride and the woman who stood beside him. Mara could feel the weight of their attention pressing against her skin. For a moment she thought of leaving, of stepping back into the rain. But Lucas's hand brushed lightly against her arm, steady, grounding, silent. It was enough to keep her there. Elena lifted her glass again, her smile cutting through the tension. "To new beginnings," she said, her gaze landing squarely on Lucas. "And to the people who teach us what love is not." A polite laugh rippled through the guests. Lucas did not move. His expression stayed composed, the kind that looked expensive because it cost him every piece of his pride. Mara's throat tightened. She remembered the envelope in her purse, the fake life printed in black ink. She was supposed to stay silent, to smile, to be nothing more than a well-dressed shadow, but something inside her refused. She stepped forward, glass in hand. "If I may," she said. The room stilled. Even the violinist's bow hung mid-air. Her voice was calm, but it carried. "I did not know what kind of night this would be. I only knew a man who asked a stranger for help." She glanced at Lucas. And I said yes, because sometimes people deserve a chance to prove they are not what others say they are. A murmur moved through the crowd. Elena tilted her head, half amused. And what exactly are you proving, dear? Mara's answer came without hesitation. That compassion is not a weakness, that losing someone does not mean you lose yourself, and that the most beautiful thing a person can do, she looked at Lucas again, softer now, is to begin again. Silence followed, real silence, the kind that humbles even the proudest hearts. Lucas's eyes met hers, and for the first time since the rain began that evening, something human flickered behind them. Gratitude, maybe even grace. Elena lowered her glass, suddenly uncertain. Around them, the crowd found new expressions: curiosity, shame, wonder. The orchestra resumed, quietly this time, as if even the music understood the moment needed gentleness. Lucas leaned close. "You did not have to say that," he murmured. "I know," Mara replied. "But maybe you needed someone to—" he exhaled, a breath that sounded like relief. "You just ended a war I have been fighting for years. Then maybe it was time someone called a truce." He smiled, the first real smile she had seen on him. "You have no idea what you just did." "Maybe I do," she said, eyes steady. "You hired a stranger to play a part. You ended up meeting yourself." The speech was over, but the echoes remained. Conversations softened. A few guests approached with genuine smiles, offering compliments that no longer carried pity. The night had shifted, so had its meaning. When they finally stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The city glowed under the streetlights, damp and alive. Lucas loosened his tie, the tension of years fading with each breath. "You changed the story," he said quietly. Mara looked at him, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "I just told the truth." They stood there for a moment, side by side, listening to the distant hum of the city. Then Lucas opened the car door for her, not as an act of control, but of respect. As she slid inside, he hesitated before following. "Mara," he said, his voice low, "you do not know it yet, but tonight was never about a contract." She turned to him, half smiling. "No, it was about keeping a promise you did not know you made." The Mercedes moved slowly through the glistening streets. The wedding behind them faded into memory. Somewhere between the city lights and the sound of tires on wet asphalt, the line between truth and pretense quietly disappeared. And for the first time, both of them understood. Some deals end with signatures, but the real ones begin with silence. The next morning broke quiet and gray over Manhattan. The world outside looked washed clean, but inside Lucas's penthouse, the air felt heavier than the rain that had fallen the night before. Mara woke on the couch, wrapped in a blanket she did not remember taking. The soft hum of the city below reminded her she was still in his world, a world of glass walls, leather, and silence that did not forgive weakness. Lucas stood by the window, coffee in hand, staring at nothing. His tie was gone, his sleeves rolled to his elbows. Without the armor of his suit, he looked less like a billionaire and more like a man trying to remember who he used to be. "You did not sleep," she said quietly. He turned, eyes tired but calm. "Neither did you." She managed a small smile. "Habit." He nodded, setting the cup aside. "They will talk, you know. The press, the board, everyone who was there. I know. They will call it a scandal. They always need a story that sells." Mara sat up. "Then let them sell it. You told the truth last night. Maybe that is rarer than money." Lucas's expression softened. "You sound like someone who still believes in people." "Maybe I do. Maybe I have to." He walked closer, stopping beside the couch. "You could leave today. I will keep my word about the payment." She looked at him, studying his face. "Is that what you want?" He hesitated. "No, but it is what would make sense." Mara stood, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "Then maybe sense is not the answer you need anymore." He exhaled, a quiet laugh breaking through the weight of the morning. "You make everything sound simple." "It is simple," she said. "You just do not want it to be." A chime interrupted them, the sharp tone of a phone vibrating on the marble counter. Lucas glanced at the Draxt screen. The caller ID read, Board chair. He declined the call. Mara raised an eyebrow. That looked important. It is, he admitted. But not as important as this. He opened the drawer near the coffee table and pulled out a folded document, the contract she had signed. Without a word, he tore it down the middle, then again, until the pieces fell like gray snow onto the floor. No more contracts, he said. No more pretending. She watched the papers scatter, each fragment erasing a line of her false identity. You did not have to do that. I did, he said quietly. Because last night, when you spoke, it was not just about me. It was about every part of me that I kept hidden. She stepped closer, the city light catching the trace of a smile on her face. Then stop hiding. For a long moment they stood there, the noise of the city below faint and distant. Lucas finally reached into his pocket and placed something on the table, a silver pen, the same one she had used to sign their deal. Keep it, he said. It was a symbol of everything I thought I could control. Now it belongs to someone who reminded me that not everything should be written in ink. Mara picked up the pen, feeling its weight. You are full of surprises, Mr. Grant. Lucas, he corrected softly. She met his gaze. Then thank you, Lucas, for the beginning. He smiled, small but real. No, thank you for the ending. The city continued its rhythm outside, but in that quiet room, something else began to move, something fragile, unspoken, and entirely real. Neither of them called it love, not yet, but both knew it was no longer a contract. It was something that had survived the silence. Morning sunlight spilled across the penthouse windows, catching the edge of the torn contract still scattered on the floor. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered in the quiet between them. Mara stood by the counter, sipping the coffee Lucas made for her. The taste was stronger than she liked, but she did not say a word. Silence, for once, felt peaceful. He moved around the kitchen with unfamiliar ease, sleeves rolled up, hair unstyled, as if the weight of expectation had slipped off during the night. I have a meeting with the board in 2 hours, he said, almost to himself. Are they going to ask about me? He nodded. They already called twice. Mara set her cup down. Then tell them the truth. Lucas looked at her, a small trace of surprise crossing his face. That I invited a homeless woman to a wedding to make a point. That you met someone who reminded you what being human feels like. He gave a quiet laugh, genuine and low. You make that sound like a good headline. It is not a headline, she said softly. It is what happened. He studied her for a long moment, then turned away to gather his jacket. The board does not deal in feelings, Mara. They deal in numbers. Then maybe that is why your world is so cold, she replied. Lucas stopped. You are not wrong. She smiled faintly. That is a first. He stepped closer, his voice low but sincere. I meant what I said last night. I do not want you to disappear after this. Mara looked down at the pen he had given her, still resting on the table. And what would I even be in your world, Lucas? Another deal? No, he said. You would be the part of it that finally makes sense. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the city alive behind the glass. It was not a confession, not yet, but something stronger, a decision. When he left for his meeting, the apartment felt different, warmer somehow. She walked through the living room, touching the bookshelves, the photographs, the quiet evidence of a man who had built everything except peace. On the balcony, she found an envelope waiting a bank card, a key, and a note written in his neat handwriting. For when you decide to stay. No conditions, no contracts. L. Her fingers trembled as she read it. No one had ever given her something without expecting repayment. She closed her eyes, letting the morning wind lift her hair. For the first time in years, she let herself imagine a life beyond survival. Hours passed. Lucas returned from his meeting later that afternoon. His face looked tired but lighter. They threatened to pull my position, he said. So I resigned before they could. Mara blinked. You what? I walked away. I built that empire to prove I could live without love. Turns out it was the only thing I could not replace. She shook her head, half smiling, half stunned. You just gave up everything. No, he said, stepping closer. I traded it for something real. He held out his hand. You once told me you had nowhere to go. Maybe now we both do. Mara looked at his hand, then at the city beyond the window, wide, bright, and full of second chances. She took his hand slowly, her voice quiet. Then let us find out where it leads. He smiled, and in that smile there was no wealth, no pretense, only the truth of two people who had stopped pretending. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, everything changed. If this fake marriage universe pulls you in, subscribe now so you never miss the next chapter. That evening, the city stretched out beneath the skyline like a new promise. The last of the daylight faded behind the towers, and for the first time, Lucas and Mara were not running from anything. They sat on the edge of the rooftop terrace, the world below them humming like a secret only they could hear. Lucas leaned against the railing, his sleeves still rolled, the wind tugging at his hair. You know, he said quietly, I thought giving up everything would feel like losing, but right now, it feels like breathing. Mara smiled. That is because, for once, it is not about control. He turned to look at her. You make that sound easy. It is not easy, she said, but it is real. They stood there for a moment, the air between them warm and calm. She could see the reflection of the city lights dancing in his eyes, silver, gold, alive. Then his phone vibrated again. He ignored it, but she saw the name flash on the screen. Elena. Mara looked away. You should answer. Some doors do not close on their own. Lucas picked up the phone, hesitated, then pressed decline. That door is already closed. She did not respond. She simply stepped closer, the night folding around them like an old story, finally ending the right way. Later, they walked through Central Park, quiet except for the sound of leaves and the distant rhythm of traffic. The city that once felt cruel now seemed almost kind. Lucas stopped near the lake. When I met you, I thought I was saving you from the rain, but you were the one who pulled me out of the storm. Mara shook her head. You saved yourself. You just needed someone to remind you it was possible. He smiled, a faint trace of wonder on his face. You make me want to start again, from nothing. Then start, she said. From here. He took her hand. It was not a gesture of possession, but of quiet recognition, the kind that said, I see you, and I am not looking away. Days passed. The media frenzy faded faster than either of them expected. One outlet ran a headline calling Lucas a fallen CEO with a heart. He laughed when he saw it. You think they believe that? He asked. Mara shrugged. Maybe, or maybe they just want to. He set the paper aside. Then let us give them a better story. A month later, they opened a small foundation together, the Second Chance Initiative. It funded shelters, training programs, and jobs for people who needed a beginning more than pity. Mara managed the day-to-day work. Lucas handled the logistics. For the first time, their worlds did not clash. They connected. At the press conference, reporters expected him to talk about reputation, strategy, and recovery. Instead, he said, money builds walls, people build bridges. I spent half my life doing the wrong thing. She showed me how to cross over. The applause that followed was quiet, genuine. Mara stood beside him, not as an employee, not as a symbol, but as a partner. That night, when the event was over, they returned to the same balcony where it all began. Rain threatened again, soft drops brushing the glass. Lucas reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. He did not open it right away. This is not a contract, he said, voice steady. It is a promise. No signatures, no rules, just two people who decided to stop pretending. Mara's breath caught as he opened the box. Inside was a simple silver ring, nothing extravagant, but it shone like truth. Lucas. He took her hand, placed the ring in her palm. You taught me that dignity cannot be bought, but love can be earned. Tears filled her eyes, but her smile was steady. Then, earn it every day. He nodded. That is the plan. And as the rain finally began to fall again, they stood together under it, not as billionaire and stranger, not as the past and the present, but as what they were always meant to become. Real. The next morning arrived with sunlight spilling softly through white curtains. The world seemed quieter, calmer, as if even New York itself had decided to slow down for them. Mara sat by the window of their small office, going through paperwork for the new foundation. The logo on the letterhead, the Second Chance Initiative, looked simple, but every letter carried meaning. It was their story written in another language. Lucas walked in, coffee in one hand, sleeves rolled, tie loosened. "The first grant came through," he said. "A small business in Queens, single mother, 2 kids. She wants to start a bakery." Mara smiled. "That is perfect." He leaned on the edge of her desk, watching her read. "You know, I used to think saving people meant writing checks. Turns out, it means showing up." She looked at him, warmth in her eyes. "And staying." He grinned. "That part too." The phone buzzed on her desk. She answered, listened, then covered the receiver. "Reporters want a follow-up interview. They want to know how the fake date at the wedding became a real partnership." Lucas laughed quietly. "Let them wonder. Some stories are better left without an explanation." After lunch, they visited the new bakery site. The air smelled of flour and fresh paint. The woman running it hugged Mara with tears in her eyes, thanking her for believing when no one else did. Lucas stood aside, smiling this time not for cameras, but for life itself. As they walked back through the street, hand in hand, Mara said, "Do you ever miss that other world?" He shook his head. "No, because this one is the first that feels honest." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows between buildings. Lucas stopped, looking at her. "You know, if you had said no that night in the rain, everything would be different." Mara smiled. "Maybe the rain had better plans for us." He laughed softly, pulling her close. "Then let us keep following the weather." They continued walking as city lights flickered on, blending into the rhythm of evening traffic. There was no spotlight now, no audience, only 2 people who had rewritten the rules of their own story. And somewhere above the noise, the world whispered a quiet truth. Sometimes the richest thing you can give someone is a second chance. Autumn came quickly, painting the city in shades of amber and gold. The leaves along Central Park drifted down like soft reminders that even endings could be beautiful. Mara locked up the foundation's office for the evening, stacking the reports neatly before turning off the lights. Across the room, Lucas was still at his desk, sleeves rolled, reading through proposals. He looked up when she spoke. "You should go home," she said. He smiled. "Home is wherever you are, remember?" She shook her head, half amused, half moved. "You say things like that too easily now." "I had a good teacher." They walked together through the quiet hallway, the sound of their footsteps echoing softly. Outside, the air was cool, carrying the smell of rain that never quite arrived. As they reached the street, a black car slowed beside the curb. A familiar voice called out from inside. "Lucas." He froze. The door opened, and Elena stepped out. She looked different, calmer, maybe older, no trace of the sharpness that once defined her. "We need to talk," she said. Mara felt the chill return. Lucas nodded once. "You remember Mara," he said. Elena smiled faintly. "Of course, the woman who turned a fake date into a redemption story." Mara's voice stayed gentle. "It was never about redemption. It was about choice." Elena looked at Lucas. "Then choose, Lucas. They want you back. The board, the investors, they will reinstate you if you agree to come home." The streetlight caught his face. He stood still for a long moment, his hand tightening around Mara's. "I already am home." Elena's expression softened, almost sad. "Then I guess I am the one still looking for mine." She turned away, disappearing into the car, the city swallowing her into its lights. Mara exhaled, tension slowly melting away. "Are you sure about that?" Lucas nodded. "I am done chasing ghosts." They started walking again, hand in hand. The silence between them no longer felt heavy, it felt full. At the corner, they passed a small bakery, the same one their foundation had funded months ago. The smell of sugar and butter spilled into the night. A sign on the door read "Grand Opening. Tomorrow." Mara stopped to read it, eyes warm. "This is why we did it," she said. Lucas looked at her, smiling. No, this is why you did it. I just followed you here. She laughed softly. Then keep following. As they walked away, the lights from the bakery reflected in the puddles at their feet, shimmering like fragments of a story that had found its ending quiet, sincere, and alive. And somewhere behind them, a new beginning waited to be written. Winter arrived quietly, softening the city with its pale light. Snow gathered along the edges of the streets, and from the window of their small office, Mara watched it fall, slow and certain. The bakery they had helped open was thriving now. Every morning, the scent of bread drifted through the air, mixing with the rhythm of traffic and the laughter of customers. It reminded her that even the smallest acts could rewrite a life. Lucas walked in, brushing snow from his coat. He carried 2 cups of coffee and a folder under his arm. "The next project is ready," he said, setting the folder on her desk. "We are expanding the foundation to Chicago." Mara smiled. "You mean you are expanding?" He shook his head. "No, we are." She laughed, shaking her head slightly. "You still cannot stop building things, can you?" He grinned. "I used to build walls. Now I build bridges. It feels better." The moment settled between them, warm and quiet. She reached for his hand across the desk. "You kept your promise," she said. "I told you I would earn it every day." They walked out together a little later, heading toward the park where the first chapter of their story had begun. Snow crunched beneath their shoes, the city glowing gold and silver around them. Lucas stopped near the same bench where she had once sat alone, cold and unseen. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked. "Every time it rains," she replied. He smiled. "Then maybe next time it does, we will not need a car to keep us dry." She looked up at him, the cold painting color into her cheeks. "You really think love can survive all this?" He nodded slowly. "Love does not survive because of the perfect moments. It survives because of the broken ones we choose to stay through." For a while, they said nothing more. The world moved quietly around them, the snow, the wind, the faint hum of life that never stopped. Mara slipped her arm through his. "Then let us keep choosing," she whispered. He smiled, his breath visible in the winter air. "Always." They kept walking as the snow continued to fall, their footprints fading into the whiteness behind them. Somewhere above the city, the clouds broke open, letting a thin shaft of sunlight fall over them, 2 people who had met by accident and built a life that no contract could ever define. If you want more untold billionaire love, subscribe and choose your next chapter on screen.